We begin with some breaking news. There's been a Russian attack on Ukraine's southeastern city of Zaporizhzhia overnight. Rescue crews are right now searching for survivors. Video circulating on social media shows destroyed roads and residential buildings. Ukrainian authorities say the rocket strikes caused dozens of casualties, with at least 17 people reportedly killed. Now, this comes just days after another attack on this city killed dozens of people. Zaporizhzhia is located near a Russian-held nuclear power plant that is the largest in Europe. We can go straight to DW's Matthias Berlinger, who joins me now from Ukraine's city of Yuzhne. Matthias, welcome. What more can you tell us about this strike in Zaporizhzhia?
Yeah, at the moment it seems like 17 people have been confirmed dead and around 50 in the hospitals. The strike hit several residential buildings, and if you look at the pictures of these buildings, they were basically cut in half with a missile hitting in the middle, and the middle of the building collapsed. Then we might expect many more deaths under the rubble. At the moment, they are trying to rescue whomever they can rescue, and to get a better picture also of how many people were in the building at the time.
OK, Matthias, could you just remind us why Zaporizhzhia is an active target for attacks like this one?
What we've seen in the past few months is that the cities that are close to the front line, like Mykolaiv, which is not far from where I am, like Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia also have been preferred targets by the Russians. That might have to do with the fact that they can be hit by cheaper low-range missiles. We often see them using S-300 missiles. These are, at the beginning, they were, or by design, they are anti-aircraft missiles, but they can be modified so they can hit targets on the ground, and Russia has a much bigger stock of them than of the mid-range missiles they have been using extensively at the beginning. It seems that they are not as abundant as before. So that might be one reason. There might also be some other reason that Russia is basically targeting the areas that it claims. Kharkiv is an area that it claims. Mykolaiv is an area that it claimed at the beginning, although it's not part of these annexed regions. And Zaporizhzhia is one of those territories that they have annexed recently, and that might be also a reason why they target especially these cities.
Radio. What's your assessment, Matthias, of the motive behind this strike in Zaporizhzhia? Because, of course, the other big story this weekend is the bridge attack in Crimea. Are these two linked?
Attacks on these cities happen frequently, but it's a pattern that after something happens to the Russians, for example, Ukraine taking back territory or strikes deep into Russian-controlled territory, or this strike on this very symbolic and also very strategic bridge, that these usually provoke some kind of retaliation, and that the attacks intensify after something like that happening. So I would clearly expect there to be a connection. Of course, we cannot confirm this in any way, but the pattern is very clear.
OK, Matthias, stay with us. We're going to get more on this Crimea bridge blast now with this report.
A massive explosion lights up the pre-dawn sky over the strait between Russia and occupied Crimea. Social media footage appears to show the moment of detonation, which Russian authorities say was caused by a truck bomb. Russia's foreign ministry later posted this video, claiming to show traffic once again flowing over the bridge. The rail and road crossing opened in 2018 as a high-profile project overseen by President Vladimir Putin. It's a key supply route for Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. For many Ukrainians, the timing of the blast just after Putin's 70th birthday makes it even more welcome.
We are very happy when we wake up in the morning and saw the news in Telegram. We were laughing, all our family. It was very happy.
This is definitely good news, and the emotions are overwhelming. We don't need the Crimean bridge. And I don't think that Putin is brave enough to use nuclear weapons in response.
Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for the attack. But in his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a thinly veiled reference to the destruction.
Ukrainians, today was a nice and mostly sunny day in our country. The temperature was about 20 degrees Celsius and the sun was shining. Unfortunately, in Crimea, it was cloudy.
The world now waits to see how Putin will respond. Many fear an escalation, as another blow to Russian forces once again puts Moscow on the back foot.
Let's go back to Matthias Berlinger now in Ukraine. Matthias, we saw people in Ukraine celebrating this bridge strike, but there are also some fears involved. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
There is clearly the expectation that Russia might step up its attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure or on civilians in the next few days. And there have also been experts, military experts, who've been warning people to be more cautious in the next few days because, of course, nobody expects this to go without retaliation. However, I haven't heard anybody who has said, well, they shouldn't have done this now, there's going to happen something terrible. It has been very much welcomed, and that's because this bridge is so symbolic and also because it's so important for the Russian supply lines. And there's basically consensus that Ukraine needs to take back these territories, and of course destroying supply lines is something that seems very rational to most people. So I really haven't heard anybody who has said that this shouldn't have happened inside Ukraine. Outside Ukraine is a different story.
OK, Matthias Berlinger reporting from Yuzhne in southwestern Ukraine. Matthias, thank you. Earlier, I also spoke with Dr. Mike Martin, a War Studies Fellow at King's College in London, and I asked him about his take on Russia's current military capability to retaliate for the Crimea Bridge incident.
Look, I think, Jared, Russia's all in Ukraine. They've used up their entire professional army. They've used up all their modern equipment, and now they're sending old equipment. And we've just seen they've mobilized all of these effectively civilians to go and fight there. There is no extra capability hiding in a cupboard somewhere that Russia can pull out to hit Ukraine. They are all in, and the Ukrainians are beating them whilst they're all in.
Now, this explosion happened on what is a prized symbol of Vladimir Putin's annexation of Crimea. What kind of a blow is this to him?
I think there's two ways that you should look at it. The first is on a strictly military plane. That bridge is incredibly important for Russian logistics. Most of their logistics are done by rail. And I noticed in your package earlier, you mentioned that the bridge had opened slightly, but only the road bridge has reopened and only one carriageway. The rail bridge, where all of the military supplies come over, is still closed and may be closed for the foreseeable future. So that's a huge problem for Russian forces in Crimea and in Kherson. There's only one other rail link, which runs through Melitopol, which is just south of Zaporizhzhia, which was mentioned in your package. Symbolically, as you mentioned, Putin opened this himself. And so for him, it's a huge blow. And people in Moscow have noticed that, and people have started to look for who to blame in Moscow.
And speaking of, looking for people to blame, Ukraine has expressed some delight but isn't openly claiming responsibility. If it was them, though, why wouldn't they want to celebrate it openly as some kind of success?
It definitely was Ukraine. Who else is it going to be? But we've actually noticed this pattern before. I don't know if your viewers remember, but there were attacks on some Russian air bases in Crimea and on some supply depots in Crimea. And actually, they were similar in style to this. They weren't missile attacks. They were probably special forces attacks or partisan attacks. And Ukraine denied them, which actually is something that Russia's done quite a lot over the last 20 years. Is something happens and then Russia goes, oh, we don't know who did that, what happened. And in a sense, the Ukrainians are just playing back the Russians' own modus operandi back to them. They've done something that's obviously them, but then they're saying, oh, we don't know who did that. Who could that possibly have been?
Now, Mike, we hear that there have been reports of a fresh attack on Zaporizhzhia. Has a Russian retaliation already started?
I think it's really difficult to point at, one attack on a city and say that's happened because of this. Because if we look over the last 6 months, Russia has been continually attacking cities. If I looked at attacks on Zaporizhzhia, there have probably been 5 attacks on Zaporizhzhia in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I think it's very hard to say that this particular attack is linked to that. Again, attacks on civilians obviously are illegal in warfare, but actually on a practical level, what they tell us is that Russia is impotent and it has no power. Why, in military terms, is it wasting munitions on civilians when it should be using them against the Ukrainian armed forces? It doesn't make any sense.
It's been really great to get your insights today. That was Dr. Mike Martin, a War Studies Fellow at King's College in London. Mike, thank you very much.